Hello, and welcome to the meal planning for weight loss masterclass. We're going to cover a lot of things, so we're just going to get into it at this point. So welcome to the masterclass. What we're going to be talking about today, obviously, is meal planning, and more specifically, meal planning for weight loss. So the things that we're going to go through. Number one, why is meal planning helpful in general, but why is it helpful specifically for weight loss? How to effectively meal plan. So really meal plan in a way that's going to be efficient, that's going to be helpful for you, helpful for your family, and actually help you lose weight. And then you will actually create a meal plan for your week. So you should have received a workbook, a meal planner workbook that we're going to be working through here. So hopefully you were able to print it out. It's just meant to help you through this as we do some exercises in this. So who am I? I think most everybody knows who I am, but just in case, my name is Carla Rudd. I'm a physician assistant, and I've been practicing for over 10 years now. I'm also obviously a weight loss coach. I'm a wife, a mom of four, and I really just got into this for a variety of reasons. My own health journey, as well as just a lot of the journeys that I've experienced with patients, and over the years, just really learning that preventative care is important and not something that modern healthcare in the US is doing a great job at right now. So that was part of why I got into this in the first place. And it's been really fun to help people not only necessarily lose weight, but really to be able to live out motherhood the way that they want to, the way that they envision it, the way that they desire it. So my story in relation to this meal planning course, as I kind of said a little bit, I did not really grow up in a very health conscious home. I, struggled with my weight when I was younger. I had a really poor understanding of what healthy nutrition was. We did not have healthy options in the house. That was not part of our culture. It was not just it just wasn't there. That's not speaking negatively about my parents. They worked a lot, they did a lot of things. So I didn't grow up with that. Even after I went to PA school and I had a lot of knowledge, it's a very different story to apply it to your life, and even more challenging when you're applying it to your life after you have kids, right? So there was a lot of things that went into this. And now that I've been coaching for some time, meal planning is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think having tools for that is going to be really, really helpful. So before we get into the actual meal planning, something that we have to talk about is how do we lose weight? And there's a lot of information on the internet, a lot of information, and almost all of it's wrong or not totally right or less than helpful. So at the end of the day, you have to be in a calorie deficit. So what is a calorie deficit? You must be taking in or consuming less than what you are expending. In one way or another, you have to be in a calorie deficit. So all of the current diets that are out there that you might see information for, a keto diet, intermittent fasting, I've heard of Whole30, I've heard of carnivore diets. There's a lot of different diets out there. And you'll see people that are very, very, very hardcore about that diet. They feel very passionate about that diet. They feel like it works really, really well. And that may be the case for them, but the way that it works is that it puts you into a calorie deficit. There's no other way that that's helping them lose weight. And so sometimes something like keto might work if it's a person that is going from a very carb heavy diet or eating a lot of simple carbs. Those foods, a lot of simple carbs or a lot of snacky kind of foods, they tend to be very hyperpalatable, meaning we can eat a lot of it because it tastes good, but not very satiating or filling. You can eat a lot of the food and it's not very filling. You're still hungry afterwards. So it's difficult to be in a calorie deficit at that point because you're eating a ton of food that's not very filling. So again, same thing with like intermittent fasting. There's nothing magic about it. You're just eating less calories in a reduced time during the day. But it's not that intermittent fasting itself is going to have some sort of weight loss magic to it. It all has to do with being in a calorie deficit. My, take on this is that it really, when you look at statistics for weight loss, people that lose a significant amount of weight and that they consider significant more than 20 pounds, they gain it back within 5 years typically. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the methods in which we often use to lose weight are not typically very sustainable. We are looking at a lot of patterns of extreme restriction or binging or, yo-yo dieting. And so we don't don't create habits, or we're not doing it in a way that we can continue to do for the long run. And so we end up right back where we started, or even worse off sometimes. So what should we be eating? How should we eat, right? I think you probably know the answer to this. So again, you'll see on the internet a variety of things like you need to cut out gluten, you need to cut out sugar entirely, you need to cut out this, that, this. And really, you have to look at your diet as the whole picture. So one particular ingredient or one particular food is never going to be the reason why you are gaining weight or why your health markers are not where you want them to be. You have to look at what are you eating most of the time. So 80% of the time, your diet should really look like whole, minimally processed foods. If you look at cultures, across the world, there is actually a wide variety in dietary patterns, meaning the kinds of foods that people are eating, across all of these different cultures. But there are some things in common in the cultures that have better health rates. And so it's things like emphasizing fruits, emphasizing vegetables, whole grains. When they're looking at protein, it's lean proteins, lean dairy, lots and lots of fiber. You're minimizing, so you don't need to cut out entirely things like sugar and other foods that you like, but minimizing them, keeping them to a smaller portion of their diet. So primarily speaking, what your diet looks like most of the time, and this can be sometimes really hard to evaluate. It can be hard for people to look at this subjectively, and you may think that you generally eat well, but if you were like to sit and write down, or what I have some of my clients do is track their food for a certain period of time, you're typically stepping outside of what you need to be consuming for the day. And it's easy to do. We're not as good about, being able to just like look at what we eat in a day and know exactly what we're eating. But what you really want to aim for is a diet that looks like that. So why should we meal plan in the first place, right? One of the biggest things that I think is important, especially for people that are trying to lose weight, a lot of times what I'll hear from people is they've struggled with their weight, they've struggled with food for most of their life, and food ends up consuming a lot of their thoughts. So if they're trying to lose weight, they can be thinking a lot about what they shouldn't be eating, what they should be eating, what they want to be eating, what they're going to get to eat. Um, and I don't mean that in like a facetious way. There's a lot of food noise. They're thinking about food often. And so meal planning can help to just get rid of or at least reduce decision fatigue, meaning you plan this out ahead of time. You don't have to think about it other than when you go to make it, and then you eat it and you move on, right? So taking some of these tasks off your plate, giving you a template to follow, and trying to avoid just feeling overwhelmed by how many decisions you have to make, and reducing the amount of thinking that you have to do about food, which sometimes can be really, really hard for people, but important. Big one, save money. So if you're the type of person or the type of family that's eating out, even once a week, if I have 4 kids, if we were eating out once a week, that's a lot of money in the long run. So, just saving money from that point of view. And oftentimes when you like say you're not planning and you go to the grocery store and you don't have a plan, I mean, how many times are you just loading your cart with other things that you didn't intend on buying? So meal planning definitely is helpful from a financial standpoint. The other big thing for eating, avoid eating unplanned foods. So for the most part, especially in the beginning of our weight loss journey, it is sometimes difficult to keep spontaneous eating to healthy foods, right? So, like, we may start having somewhat of a plan of what we're going to eat, and you end up in the pantry snacking on X, Y, and Z thing, right? So, oftentimes, spontaneous eating needs to be tied to understanding your hunger cues. So, are you actually hungry at that point? And choosing things that are good options at that point instead of snacking on stuff that's still going to leave you hungry. Um, so just being more intentional about what you want to eat, and not necessarily eating things that you didn't really plan on eating. You want to feel like you're more in control of your choices in that realm. And another one that I think is incredibly valuable because of how I grew up, and I'm speaking mostly to moms who have kids, so valuable habit for the family. This was not at all a skill that I was taught, and it took me many, many years to develop a system that worked for me. I have obviously multiple kids, and I want them to be able to feel like they not only know basics of cooking, but that they understand nutritional choices and that it comes a lot more naturally to them. I cannot tell you if we ever really had fruit in the house or very many vegetables ever when I was growing up. I ate a ton of highly processed foods. And I'm not saying I'm like ruined because of that, but it took a while and it took a lot of intentional effort for me to get to the point that I am now. And I would love if my kids don't necessarily have to do that. So I think it's a really valuable tool, practical, really helpful for your family. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do in the workbook that you got, exercise number one. So I want you to think about everything that you ate today. Write down everything that you can think of, all of it. Just write it all down. And then you're going to mark the things that are a source of protein. So I'm going to go to the next slide where I have a list of proteins that you can see. And then you're going to mark all of the fruits and vegetables, so all of the plants. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Okay, so um, on a scale of 1 to 5, I want you to just think to yourself or write in the chat, how close was this to your goal way of eating? And on a scale of 1 to 5, how often do you feel like you're just throwing something together? Right. So we throw a lot of things together, which is okay if you're throwing the right things together, and we'll talk about that. And then here is your protein sources. So the other question that I have when you're looking on that is how many sources of protein do you have and how many sources of fruits and vegetables? We're going to talk about how you really want to base your meals or look at how you can really make a plate for yourself, basically, and what you want to be having as the center, centering your meal around. So centering your meal around proteins and centering your meals around sources of fiber, fruits and vegetables, things like that, is going to be important. So if you're looking at your food today and you really only have like one source of protein and you haven't even touched a fruit or vegetable today, this is part of what we're going to talk about. All right, so let's get into the actual meal planning. So you can go to your workbook to exercise number 2 and look at grocery lists simplified. So when you are meal planning, you are going to be buying a lot of the same things. And you may already have a method for this. And maybe you just have it internally in your mind, or you have an actual list somewhere on your phone or physical or whatever. But I want you to sit down there and I want you to write down all of the things that you repetitively buy. So, most of the time, almost everyone's buying sources of bread, some kind of milk. That little picture right there would give you some ideas like fruits, any vegetables, any of the repetitive food that you buy every single week or almost every single week, I want you to write that down. And at the same time, I want you to think about things that you have in your pantry already currently that are things maybe you don't want to be repetitively buying anymore. So we sometimes get into a rhythm of purchasing things that like we just tend to have around and we don't have great self-control around those things. And eventually, I think it's important to learn the skill of being able to be around all foods and being able to eat a serving and be satisfied with it. But sometimes it's just really difficult for us to do that. And especially early in our weight loss journey, there's nothing wrong with just not having it in the house and really trying to have those whole foods mainly in your home. So I want you to go through your pantry mentally or even physically. You can go look and think about things that you're buying that maybe you don't want to buy anymore. And then write down all of the other things that you generally are purchasing every single week. Okay, so if you're watching this on the replay, you can pause it and continue to make your list, but I'm going to keep rolling through this here. So keep that in mind. We're going to keep going. So then you can flip to exercise 3 in your workbook, and it should look like a weekly planner. So basically, Monday to Sunday there. And I want you to write down, think of your upcoming week, and I want you to write down all of the details in your upcoming week, specifically things that are going to be pertinent to your time for meal planning. So if you have work and then you have your kids' soccer practice or something like that, you're going to want to write that down. And then once you do that for all of the days, I want you to label them either A or B. So A is going to represent days that you have some time to cook. So a day that you can start a meal cooking from, start to finish and have enough time to do that at home without having to like really rush out of the house. And B are like days where you have like 30 or less minutes. You need to be able to throw something together very, very quickly and get out the door or do whatever it is that you need to do. So go through your, week and label them either A or B. And I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay. And then we're going to move to exercise number 4. So we're thinking you already have basically made a grocery list of all of the things that you typically buy already. You're looking at your week ahead of time and you know exactly what days are going to look like, what days are really crazy, and what days are manageable. So what we're going to think about right now, what we're creating a meal plan for is as if your whole week was B days. So every single day that you had this week was crazy busy and you had very little time. So when I think of A days, I think of the time that the meals that you enjoy making that take a little bit more time. And I think a lot of people, for the most part, have recipes that they like. We're going to talk about that at the end as well. But A days, you have more flexibility there, right? Like you can make something that you enjoy and you can take your time. B days, I think, are often the kind of days that people get off track or struggle with because they either end up eating something that they didn't necessarily want to be eating, end up ordering out and definitely eating something they didn't plan on eating, or just feeling very frazzled and overwhelmed and disorganized and like they're throwing together food that isn't meeting a lot of their nutritional goals. So if you're someone, obviously you're trying to lose weight and you're having a lot of B days, you're not being very intentional with the way that you're planning meals, it's going to be very easy for you to get to the end of the day and not be in a caloric deficit anymore because you've, eaten something here and there wasn't generally a plan, and lo and behold, at the end of the day, you're well above your calories. Obviously, it depends on what you're choosing, but we tend to not make great choices when we're, trying to get out the door, right? So in this exercise number 4, you're going to be thinking about quick days and we're going to go through all of the meals. So you can flip to that in your workbook and you're going to think about breakfast. So ingredients that you want to have on hand for a fast breakfast. So I listed some options here. Eggs can be plus or minus. You might have some minutes to make some scrambled eggs. You may not. So depending on how much time you truthfully have. Oatmeal, I love overnight oats. If you Google overnight oats, you'll find like 17,000 different variations of that. So those are obviously something you can prep the night before, literally grab out of your refrigerator and leave. Um, so any kind of protein waffle, pancake, or muffin, obviously you may not have the time to make that in the morning, but you can get them like in the store frozen, or you can make them and then freeze them yourself. There are a boatload of protein drinks out there. It's not my favorite to just grab a protein drink, but it would certainly be better than nothing, which is what a lot of people do. Some kind of high protein Greek yogurt, obviously pair fruit with some of these things. That's easy to grab. I put cereals on here as a lot of them are not a lot of bang for your buck, meaning they're not super high in protein and they're, calorically sometimes on the higher end, and they generally, if they're not like a high fiber cereal, then you may still be hungry. A bagel. So there's a lot of high protein bagels out there as well now. So you can grab a bagel or half a bagel if that's going to be more in your calorie goal. And then maybe like a Greek yogurt or something to pair another source of protein with that. Avocado toast, that's like all the rage right now. Cottage cheese, some people don't like cottage cheese, but that's something that you can sneak into like a smoothie, which is there on the next thing. You can, some people put that into scrambled eggs, so they make scrambled eggs and put cottage cheese in there, so you could sneak some protein in that way. Chia pudding, that's something you can do the night before. So these are just ideas that I have off the top of my head, but think of things that are fast breakfast for you that are sort of centered around protein as much as possible with some fruit or vegetable as well. So let's think same exact idea. We're going to go through and list ingredients to have on hand for lunches. So lunch, I think, is a struggle. When I talk to a lot of people, many people are struggling with lunch, either because they're working and they haven't had the time to prepare lunch ahead of time, or they're at home and they just don't really have that many things there to slap together a lunch. So these are a lot of ideas that I have or eat that would fit into categories of lunches. So I have bag salads every single week. I buy pre-bagged salads. So if you don't have the time, again, we're thinking a B-day. You don't have the time to cut up lettuce, cut up a vegetable, cut up this, cut up that. The pre-bagged salads with a protein source like chicken, easy. That's why rotisserie chicken is listed as number 2, because I buy a rotisserie chicken every single week because that is a very easy thing to throw into a salad, to throw into a wrap. These are quick things. There's nothing wrong with using canned meat. If you used canned chicken or tuna, um, I always have low calorie wraps on hand. I always have a lot of fruit. Obviously, there's a chicken and hummus wrap on there. You can purchase pre-cut veggies. You can purchase hard-boiled eggs, or you can hard-boil eggs the night before. Smoothies, so you can make smoothies in a lot of different ways that can have a significant amount of protein in them. So you can look at this list and try and see if any of these things would fit into something that you would eat for lunch, but try and jot down as much as you can for ingredients to have on hand for some kind of fast lunch. I have on there as well low calorie dressings and sauces. I think a lot of people have like gotten scared away from using any kind of dressing or any kind of sauce because, some of them, and it is true, some of them can be very, very calorically dense, meaning like a tablespoon of something could be 200 calories, but they have come a long way with that, and there's plenty, plenty, plenty that are very calorie friendly and very delicious, like 50 calories for 2 tablespoons of a dressing that would make you actually eat the vegetable, right? So that's the tough part for me, is I didn't like vegetables, so I had to find ways to make it better for me, and that was one of the ways. Okay, and then we're going to move on to dinners. So when you're thinking about dinner, I mean, really when you're thinking about any of your meals, but when you're thinking about dinner and you're thinking about a B-day that needs to be quick, really what you want to think of is what's going to be my source of protein, what's going to be my source of vegetables, what's going to be my source of carb. And if you can grab those things and throw them together quickly, then you have a decently balanced meal to get you through the day, right? And one of the things that I encourage people to do, especially when they're doing this, is starting to measure some of these things. So if you're, making your dinner and you're doing this where you're just kind of throwing things together, take the extra 2 minutes, measure out your chicken, measure out your rice. It does not take very long, and then you have a much better idea of calorically where that dinner's going to land you. So some proteins, like I said, having rotisserie chicken, having frozen burgers of some sort. They're usually pretty quick to cook. Again, canned meats are fine. I consider ground meats quick. Usually you can brown them and saute them relatively fast. And then the other thing that I recently acquired over the last couple years are Instapots and an air fryer. And a lot of people, I know a lot of people have these. They can cook meat very, very quickly. So even if you've like totally messed up and you have absolutely nothing cooked or ready to go or whatever, I have my favorite chicken recipe is an air fryer chicken recipe that's ready in 11 minutes. So that's not, and sincerely, like that's how fast it is. So if you don't have them, consider one if it's in your budget. But if you do, which a lot of people do have them, there's plenty of recipes out there for you to be able to make a very fast protein if you don't have anything ready. And so we're going to move to the vegetables, and this is totally make this as easy as possible on yourself. So I think a lot of people struggle with just getting enough. Americans as a whole, we just do not eat enough fruit and vegetables. And so on a fast day like this, where you need to have something on the table relatively quickly, frozen vegetables are your friend. Getting pre-cut vegetables or pre-cut fruit is your friend. Fruit and vegetables have very similar fiber profiles. There's some advantages to the other. That's why they tell you to eat both of them. But if you can't get anything but fruit on the table, that's also okay. So consider things that are canned, consider things that are pre-bagged, consider things that are frozen, like stir fries or just regular old frozen vegetables. And then try and mix it up a little bit. So what I do on these kind of days where I'm like, just throwing really plain stuff onto the table, I have my favorite sauces, I have my favorite spices, and I just throw them on there, and it just adds a little bit of something to make the meal a little bit more, pleasing to everybody. And it's not going to be perfect. This is a B day. This is the kind of day that you're just throwing things together, but it's going to be better than going through drive-through or picking something else out. So again, just sit and underneath on that workbook, think through all the vegetables, easy vegetables and fruits that you would want to have on hand so that you'll be able to just pull them out. And then it's the same idea for carbs. And we're going to be talking about more about complex carbs than simple carbs. But a lot of these things also come in pre-cooked packages. So when you're thinking about a very busy day, I want you again to list all of the carbs that you can think of that you generally would want to have in your house. But almost all of them are available in some kind of pre-cooked fashion. So I usually have a pre-cooked jasmine rice bag or pre-cooked quinoa bag that I can just throw in the microwave. It takes 90 seconds and then you have something. Again, this is something that you want to measure. I put white and brown rice on there because white rice is still okay. I know you've also gotten totally scared away from white rice, but if you're measuring it and eating it in an appropriate portion, there's nothing wrong with that. Same thing with all these other ideas. So if these are things that you or your family would be willing to eat, pastas, chickpeas, beans, lentils, potatoes, all potatoes are okay. You don't need to just stay away from potatoes altogether. Again, it's more about getting the appropriate portion of that than anything. But so you've listed your proteins, you've listed vegetables, you listed carbs. And then on the one of the last pages in that workbook is simple meal variations. So another thing to think through for your meals is think of something that you already like and think of a way that you can make a variation of that. So I talk about making variations of tacos, like having a base meat, having some kind of vegetable that you can throw on top with a side of rice right there. You've hit all of those three things. If you can vary that up a little bit, like bowl variations, like I put on there. So sweet potato plus ground turkey plus rice and some sauce, any other veggies you have on hand. Caprese variation, so that's like a cheese with a vegetable, and you can put that with a nice sauce, and you can put that on a salad, you can put that in a wrap, you can put that on top of chicken, so some kind of variation like that. Stir fry variation, so vegetables that you really like, with a sauce that you really like that you're very quickly able to saute, pair it with a chicken or some kind of protein source. If you like tofu, if you like fish, any of those things, pair it, done. And there I have meat protein variations. So think about, like, obviously there's a 5 bajillion different ways that you can make chicken. And experiment with that. Try different things. If you're getting, bored where you're not eating, enough protein because you just you don't want to do the same thing you've always done, then try one different thing, but don't throw baby with bathwater, right? Okay, so right then and there, you have your grocery list that has all the things that you buy on repeat. You have a 1 week calendar that you have written down everything you have going on this week, and you've already picked out days that are going to be crazy and days that are going to be, realistic. So you can now go back and take you now have a list that you've made for breakfast, lunch, and dinner full of things that you want to have on hand. So now you can just go and plug and play. So look at your week, look at those, B days and say, all right, for breakfast, we're going to do this. So I want to have this on hand. For lunch, we're going to do this. So I want to have this on hand. For dinner, we're going to do these things. So I want to have these things on hand. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but if you pick similar things, then you're not going to be buying stuff for 12 different recipes. So if you're going to do chicken and vegetables on one day, then you can just do chicken and different vegetables on a different day, or a different source of protein and those vegetables on a different day. Or if you're going to be doing something with a certain flavor palette, like that's going to have a lot of like onion or garlic, then pick another recipe that's going to be similar to that. But you now have an entire plethora of things that you can pick from that are very, very quick for you to put together in your weekly meal plan, and done. You at least have something there. So more important tips for meal planning. So batch cooking. So I am sure you have seen people do batch cooking where they make the entire meal, and they have the entire meal, they put it into those little like the little containers, and they have, 4 or 5 days worth of whole meals. And if that works for you, if you say you like have a lot of time on Sunday and you're able to do that for like 3 days of your week, perfect. A lot of people don't have the time or the bandwidth to make the entire meal that large like that. So what I typically suggest is consider more ingredient batching. So what I tend to do is like on my A days, so on the days that I do have a little bit more time to spend some time cooking a meal, I will either, if the meal has ingredients that I'm going to use again, so say I'm making the meal on the A day that has chicken, I will just make more chicken to use later in the week on those B days. So I'll just have extra protein. Protein is an easy thing to try and batch make. So if you're making any kind of meat, really, just cook more of it, and then you're going to have extra for the rest of your week. You can do the same thing with vegetables if you're taking the time to like pre-cut and roast vegetables, or pre-cut and saute vegetables. Just do more of them, and you're going to have more ingredient batching. And then the other thing is common ingredient meals. So again, if you're looking at your A days, you can pick two recipes that are at least somewhat similar in ingredients, so that you don't have to buy a bajillion different things. So like this week, we're making two beef-based meals so that I can just get a big thing of beef at Sam's Club and be done with it, right? Or if I was doing chicken, I would probably do, two chicken-based meals so that I can just get that larger amount of chicken and either batch it, whatever ends up working better for my week. So try and consider common ingredient meals when you're thinking about your A days, to make B days, easier. Freezer friendly meals. So this is something that I've gotten somewhat better at over the years, but most soups and chilies or pulled meats are usually pretty easy to freeze. So if you are planning on taking the time to, say, make a chili, which is a great meal, make a large batch of it, which really just requires a little bit more ingredients, and take half of it and freeze it. If you did this once a week or once every other week, you would very quickly have some options in your freezer for a B day, right? So you can pull it out in the beginning of the day when you know it's going to be crazy and you're done with it. So consider, as you pick out your meals for the week, is there anything that you can make more of so that you can freeze? Making a list and making it visible. So I think it's important to have some way that you have your recipes organized and easy for you to view. So I have like a whole Pinterest board of all the dinner recipes that we like to use. So you can have it electronically on your phone, or if it's easy, if you have something you can put on your refrigerator, the workbook that we did is basically what I'm talking about, like listing all of the recipes that you've done that you enjoy, listing a lot of things that you like to have on hand. And then that way, when you're trying to sit down and meal plan, you can just look at that and say, all right, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. It's not obviously perfect, but this is going to make it a lot easier for you to look at your week and plan much, much, much faster, right? How you get your groceries. So obviously we've made this meal plan, which, we've been in this for maybe 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes where you already have a grocery list of things that you repetitively buy, plus an entire week's meal plan full of things for each of the meals that you would want to have on hand. So you've already done that portion of it. And I would say that you try your best to dedicate some time in your week to this. If you have a consistent schedule, then try to stick with a consistent time of when you're going to do this. But otherwise, you need to look at that week. If you're going to have a crazy week, you need to look at that week, go back to that worksheet there, look at it and say, when am I going to have time to meal plan? And then when am I going to have time to actually go get these groceries? So if you have the kind of time to go to the grocery store and pick up the groceries, great. I do grocery delivery a lot. If you have never done that before, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do it, and try it. It takes a little bit of time at first because you have to sit there and think about everything that you want to have, and punch it into the whatever grocery store app. But almost every app that I've tried for all of the stores that I've gone to, like basically save all of that. So the next time that you do it, you just look back at things that you've ordered before, say click, 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 yes, 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 done. So now when I go back to like Giant or Sam's Club or some of the groceries stores that I pick up groceries from, I can look at what I've purchased before, which includes all of those repeat items, and I just go down the list and repeat all of those things. And then I look at what else we need to have, right? So do your best to try and plan some set time into your week, looking at that week in the beginning of the week. When is this going to get done? And have that as part of your schedule. This is a non-negotiable or you will not have food. The other point that I wanted to make was do your best to experiment. So for me, I didn't really have a lot of vegetables growing up. And if I continued with that mentality, I still would not be eating vegetables right now. So at some point, I had to say, all right, vegetables are good for me. Fruit is good for me. I have to eat more of them. And I had a goal of eating more of them, of increasing the amount of fiber in my diet. And so I experimented. If I tried it one way and I didn't like it, I tried a different sauce. I tried a different spice. I tried to cook it a different way. Be willing to try and experiment with different things before just throwing it out the window. This is a really common thing that we sort of get it in our heads that we have some kind of aversion to a food or we just don't like it. We're never willing to try it again. And for one, it makes it difficult for you to increase your fiber intake and or just even increase your palate. But also our kids are watching us and we get really mad at them for being picky eaters. So we need to be able to be willing to also experiment with these things as well. And more likely than not, even if you're adding a little bit of cheese or a little bit of sauce or something, you're still going to probably be eating better than you were because you were focusing on incorporating more of those whole unprocessed foods, right? General meal tips. So these are just general meal tips for eating for weight loss in general. One of the biggest things for Americans and for moms in particular is slow down. We eat too fast and therefore we end up eating too much. So at like 60 or 70% of your plate, just stop and get up, go drink some water, and try and focus on those hunger cues and see if you're actually still hungry because chances are you may not be. Studies show if you eat on a smaller plate, you're going to load it with less food. So consider eating on smaller plates. Load with your veggies and protein first, and then put in the other things that you may have. Pause partway through. Drink lots of water throughout. And a tip for snacking that I think is a good tip that people really struggle with. If you are a snacker, like if you just tend to always want to go get a snack, there are studies that also show that you are more likely to reach for things that are eye level and that are visible or close to you. So if you tend to, be at a desk and snacking, or if you tend to like go just open up your refrigerator and want to grab a snack, things that are eye level are going to be the first thing that you see and the first thing that you may pick. So try to make those prepped veggies and fruit have that up front so that you would be more likely to grab it. Just general other tips. Love your leftovers. So if you have an A or a day, 2 A days in your week, say that you're going to spend some time actually cooking a meal, make enough so that you have leftovers and learn to just deal with them. I know some people don't love leftovers either. I definitely get it, but they're going to make your life a lot easier. So I would suggest at least once a week being okay with eating leftovers. Number two, we've talked about that before, using Instapot, air fryers, slow cookers, all of those things are going to make your life easier if you already own them. Google and search for recipes that are specific to those things. We talked about number three before, make meals with similar ingredients. Number four, high volume foods. So, especially when it comes to weight loss, you want to eat more foods that are lower in calorie but high in volume. So, that's why, fruits and vegetables are very good to eat when you're trying to lose weight because you can eat a fair amount of them and have lots of volume, fill your stomach up, lots of fiber, feel full for not a whole lot of calories. So try and search and use more of those foods inside of your diet, and that's going to help with feeling more full when you're in a calorie deficit. Number five, one pot, one sheet pan recipes. So there's lots of them out there as well. Again, this is probably more for like an A day when you're taking time to make some sort of meal that you really enjoy making. But there's lots of them that are out there that don't take a whole lot. But even on a B day, if you throw everything, throw some vegetables and throw a protein source and roast it, you can probably get that done in, 45 minutes. So that may or may not fit into your B day depending. And then we've talked about batch what you can, right? So if you can batch the whole meal, great. But if you batch ingredients, that's going to help you get ahead. You're at least going to have some things on hand. So even if of all the things we've talked about, if you just start with batching some ingredients ahead of time, you're really going to help yourself. So we've talked about a lot of things, right? You now have a grocery list, you have a weekly calendar that you can look at, you can separate your days out to A's and B's. You started to at least have some recipes that you can make. You have a ton of ideas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that are things that you can just buy to have on hand to be able to throw together very quickly. So you have what you can, right? You have right now what you can use for an entire week of meal planning, right? But sometimes that's not the only thing that's causing us to not lose weight, right? So a lot of what I do in coaching is helping with this practical, right? Helping with practical things like meal planning and figuring out how you're going to do that best in your week to make it easier on yourself. But there's a lot more to it. So here in this graphic, it's just talking about the things that we like to put together here. Your vision without the burden of excess weight, figuring out what's keeping you stuck, digging deep. This can be really hard to figure out why it is that you can't do what you want to do, and creating simple steps to success and being patient with yourself. So in coaching, meal planning is a very helpful tool. And why I wanted to do this master class is that I think it's almost imperative for anybody that's really trying to lose weight to really get better at meal planning. But if you feel like that is one piece of the puzzle, it's because it is. It's not foolproof just because you've had a class on meal planning or you've really improved your meal planning. There are multiple things that affect our health and multiple things that affect our weight and our ability to lose weight. So if you've tried a lot of different diets and you end up kind of where you started, if you feel overwhelmed by the process of losing weight, especially in the midst of your life, if you feel like I just can't do it in this season, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, it's just not something I can do right now. If you feel like you sometimes know what you do need to do, but you really struggle with actually being able to follow through and do it, if you would love guidance, support, and accountability, this is what I do in coaching and what I really enjoy doing, because coaching will help you dig into the why, the what, and the how of weight loss. It'll help you develop systems that work for you in all seasons of life. So even when you're utterly overwhelmed and momhood is just like it's it's hard sometimes, right? Like everyone will say that it's really difficult sometimes, but there are systems that you can make and that you can develop in your life that are going to make this easier. Develop plans to get you back on track when you get derailed. Learn how to actually follow through on what you say you want to do or what you say you should be doing, learning behaviorally how to do that. working on your mindset, changing your mindset and your thoughts so that you can actually walk forward into this, that you can live out life, live out motherhood, live your life with your kids and your family in the way that you really desire to. That's really my heart in coaching. It's obviously I want to help people lose weight, but everyone that I talk to, it's not just about weight loss, right? Like it's about being able to live the kind of life that you want to live, about being able to be as active as you want to be, about being able to enjoy nutritious foods as much as you want to, about being able to teach your kids that and have your kids do that. Those are the powerful things that are what I really love working with people and what people really want, what women are really looking for. So that's what I do in coaching. So if this has really, spoken to you in some way, and if you want to talk more, I'm rooting for you always. So I really hope this masterclass was helpful to you, for you to just dig through. Hopefully, just if this was something that you want to go back and rewatch so that you can sit with that workbook and really think through how you can better implement this into your life, into your week, so that you can have a plan for even B days, A days, all the crazy days. But if you're really looking to dig deep, if you're really looking to just walk away from these struggles altogether, please book a discovery call and let's chat. There's no obligation there. You don't have to sign up for anything, but we can talk about what I do in coaching. We can talk about my group programs, and we can see if this is something that's really going to help move the needle and help you get to the place that you want to be, not only with weight loss, but with all the other goals that are associated with that. So thanks so much for coming to this. Please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to chat about anything. I am an open book and would love to talk with you guys. So thanks so much.